Hi everybody, this is Lee, and this Black Girl Magic video is about the ultimate woman, Harriet Tubman. And you just are not going to get through Black History Month or any discussion of women without coming to Harriet Tubman, an American hero, almost a superstar, almost definitely who lived at the outer edge of her abilities in every arena. I admire her very much. But who was she? So she was described as being a physically small woman, but of course with a very powerful outsized legacy. She was born into slavery between 1815 and then 1825. Her birthday has been mentioned like three or four different dates, so thereabouts in that 10-year stretch. She was born on the eastern shore of Maryland, and she was originally called Araminta or Minty Ross. And then right before she escaped, she changed her name to her mother's name, which is Harriet, after her mother, and then adopted her husband's last name of Tubman. And some people speculate that that was just to throw slave catchers off, the people that would go out and chase down slaves. And so, not everyone owned slaves. Not everyone was a slave owner, but there were plenty of people who were employed in the control of slaves, the patrollers, the catchers, the bounty hunters to bring slaves back and get the reward, and then also the drivers that would whip the slaves and force them to work. They weren't technically owners, but they were definitely part of an oppressive system. And so she was an abolitionist in antebellum America during the slave period. And so she did live in harsh conditions as a little girl. Um, there was violence to the point that her skull was fractured, and she suffered dizzy spells from that time on. Um, so she lived in an oppressive slave society, but she found the courage to liberate herself from her conditions. And for that alone, the courage to free herself. She was not freed. She freed herself from slavery, and then she freed others as well. So she built a support network of black and white friends that she could trust and who could host and transport fugitive slaves from 1851 to 1860. She was one of the most famous conductors on the Underground Railroad. And so in that decade, she made 19 trips and liberated about 300 slaves. And there's a lot of secrecy surrounding her work because it was considered criminal behavior, criminal felonious behavior, to not only escape herself, to steal herself away as property, but then to steal the property of others, what the white owners considered their property, other human beings. She helped to steal them and lead them to freedom in the North. Not only herself, she liberated about 300 slaves, including her parents, relatives, and friends. Anyone who wanted to go, they jumped on board the train with her. And so there was a risk to her life with each trip because the bounty just got higher and higher. And that there were some people who suspected that it was actually John Brown, um, who was considered then a domestic terrorist, who actually took up arms to free slaves. They thought he was the one stealing them. They never figured out that it was Minty, who was also known as Harriet Tubman, who was stealing slaves away or hostages. And so she had a very strong belief in God, and the head injury that she suffered, and I say it like that, but she was actually injured by a slave owner, not hers. someone else's who was trying to throw something, a weight, at another slave, and it hit her instead. But she had visions. She had spells. She saw things, and that assisted her on the road to freedom. She did get surgery for that, and that kind of eased it a little bit. She mixed with William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, who were also conductors on the Underground Railroad, and that Frederick Douglass spoke of hosting the same number of slaves on one trip that many people suspect was Harriet Tubman. Names were not named because, again, it was dangerous work. And so she also participated in Civil War efforts. She spied for the Union. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. There was succession, and then Lincoln made it clear that he wanted to limit the spread of slavery beyond the existing boundaries. And then he outlawed slavery in the Confederate States, and then he finally emancipated all slaves. But at each step, Harriet Tubman continued her work. Um, let's see. She was very selfless. She worked as a cook and a nurse during the Civil War. She knew local curative plants, and so she was also a nurse. She was also a spy and a scout for the military. And so she was the first woman in the Civil War to lead an assault, the Combahee River raid, in which 700 slaves were set free. And that was partially due to her efforts as she led the assault, serving as the scout and the spy for that area. And so many other honors that she performed. After the Civil War, she returned home to Auburn, New York. She married. She helped many people in need. There are some that consider that almost generous to a fault, that she spent years in poverty, but that people were writing little books about her, setting down her life story, and then from those sales, she received a small income. And that she also became a supporter of women's suffrage. And so, again, there's that intersection where you see her definitely giving her life, health, and safety to lead slaves out of bondage, but then also turning towards women's suffrage, similar to Sojourner Truth, meaning that women needed to be free too, in many respects. And so she also created a home for the aged and indigent colored. And so she actually became a resident of that home too when she fell on hard times. And a part of that reason is that she was not paid for her service for her work with the Army until later in life, and that she had to write again and again and again in order to receive payment for all that she had contributed to the war effort. She finally did receive payment. But there's also one interesting aspect about Harriet Tubman that I find fascinating. Is her work with three very important men, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, who were pretty much on the same side in some respects in terms of how they viewed slavery, being against it. Abraham Lincoln kind of worked his way up to being against slavery. John Brown was very much opposed, and then so was Frederick Douglass, having been a former slave himself, and said, I'm not with it. But they all came about it from a different way. John Brown took up arms against the slave system, launching attacks on military garrisons to get ammunition. And that apparently Harriet Tubman did not participate in that with him, but actually helped to recruit people to help him with that effort, the same way that she recruited soldiers for the Union Army, black soldiers for the Union Army. So she helped to recruit for John Brown. And then Frederick Douglass, being an abolitionist himself, used a printing press, his words and his voice, operating in daylight. Then, of course, Abraham Lincoln was the President of the United States, using the power of that office to oppose the slave system for political reasons. Harriet Tubman operated at night in concealment, um, operating below the radar to where she would not gain notice of the wrong kind of attention because she was going back and forth down into enemy territory, and apparently through the places where she was once property and not wanting to risk being captured again. So she had to operate below the radar. But all of these people combined efforts to oppose a really harsh economic system. And for Harriet Tubman's service, dedication to others, to her friends, to her relatives who she rescued out of bondage, to the soldiers that she helped to scout for and guide um, during the war between the states, for her contributions to the women's suffrage movement, doing quadruple, quintuple duty. Harriet Tubman is black girl magic, but that's not even all. Almost words cannot explain her importance of being the ultimate woman in terms of changing not only her existence, but having a tremendous effect on an entire economic system, political system, having an effect on a war between the states, very much being considered a giant among women, even having been described as only 5 feet tall. If we could only all live our lives like that, joining into the fight to make the world a better place. That's Harriet Tubman, Black Girl Magic.